Hello everyone, my name is Larissa Wells, and for my research project I decided to go over the umbrella movement. So, just to go over the contents really quickly, first I will be going over what the umbrella movement is, the research question, how globalization fits into all of this, the preceding movement, the Tiananmen movement, then I will be comparing the two, and then going over the uniqueness of the umbrella movement, what trait really made it stand out, and then finally just wrapping up my points. The umbrella movement began in 2014 in Hong Kong with a protest against an electoral reform proposal that was put across by the National People's Congress Standing Committee. If this proposal was passed, it would have limited the type of candidates that could vie for the chief executive position, thus limiting the representation for the Chinese citizens. So, the Chinese citizens decided they were going to push back, and they are fighting for a more democratic government and greater political freedom, typically in the form of representatives and voting. Real quick fun fact, it was named the Umbrella Movement. As you can see, they have umbrellas after policemen and troops would fire tear gas and pepper spray at them. So they started bringing umbrellas and things of that nature. So, after all that, we come to the question. What might make the Hong Kong umbrella movement successful in pushing the Chinese government to be more democratic based on the Tiananmen movement and social media? So, what aspects of this umbrella movement is going to essentially show the success in making the Chinese government more democratic? But where does globalization fit into all this? Well, some of the motivations for the Chinese citizens to protest are actually main ideas of globalization. For example, open society. Micklethwaite and Woolridge talked about this in their chapter, and it is essentially an open-ended world system where freedom is prioritized. And of course, the Chinese citizens are protesting against these political figures, types of governments that are limiting their freedom. They're fighting for their freedom. They're also fighting for democratization, which an open society can be a part of that. Globalization actually perpetuates the spread of democracy and of other ideas. Micklethwaite and Woolridge, though, specifically pointed out that democratization leads to liberty, which is a chance to renew the fundamental rights of the individual, aka human rights. And in this case, the human rights being fought for here are political, which makes sense. All of these things that the Chinese citizens are fighting for just show how globalization is prevalent everywhere. The halting process of democratization is the same as the halting process of globalization. So, all of these, the fundamental rights and everything, they were being fought for before the umbrella protest by the Tiananmen movement. So, before this movement even began, there were protests that happened beforehand, mainly by university students because they were unhappy with the living conditions and the lack of reform that the government had promised but never really acted upon. This all came to a head in 1989 when 25% of the population showed up in Tiananmen Square for a peaceful protest to be pro-democracy. But after a while, they were protesting for a few months, and after a little bit, the government sent troops in and they turned this peaceful protest violent. Many people lost their lives. Well, not as many people have died in the umbrella movement yet as did in the Tiananmen movement. They have so much in common. They're both large-scale protests, and not only that, but they only turned violent after the government interfered. And these are all university students. They're peaceful, they're just fighting for what they believed in. They're motivated by freedom. They want a greater amount of freedom, and the best way they know how to do that is through turning their government democratic. Even though these have similarities with the Tiananmen movement, this movement is unique. Social media has made it so this movement has online support, in-person support. It's persuaded so many new people of the freedom that they're fighting for. This movement is so deeply entrenched in social media and people's lives, it can't die now. The umbrella movement will be a success. And this is because of all the things that we had talked about earlier, the motivation of the citizens, the quantity of them, the backing it has by past democratic movements, foreign support, which I didn't get to go into very much, but democracy is a Western idea and many Western countries support this. Not only that, but social media has entrenched this movement in modern times. There's no getting around this movement, and it's not going to die until something changes. These here are the references I talked about in the PowerPoint, and these are the references that I used to create this argument. Thank you for listening.